Amma Ba'd. And today we are perhaps on the second final part of our study on this name, and we'll just be mentioning certain ahadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he has mentioned the attribute of Karam in them. We'll also be going how to conduct Tasbeeh and Tahmeed and Dhikrullah using the name of Allah Dhul-Jalali Wal Ikraam, and also Tawassul, how to make dua using this name of Allah. And so it's been mentioned that Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anh, he said that do not exaggerate in the dowries of women. That when it comes to the mahar, don't exaggerate with them. And we see that this is a common trend today, that with, when people get married, that, the amount of the mahar is over the roof. So much so that men, they have to, it's a common scenario today that they have to go down the route of getting loans riba. They have to indulge in riba, or they have to get a haram type of mortgage in order to fulfill a mahar. Subhanallah. Umar ibn Khattab said that if this was anything to do with karam, or if this was makrumatan, if this was honorable in any way, if this was a sign of taqwa in any way whatsoever, then the first person to have done this would have been Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He would have been the first to increase the mahar. But if you look at Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he did not do that. He didn't do that. So anything when it comes to being karam, being honorable, or having taqwa, having consciousness of Allah, then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was always the first to do it. He was always the first to do it. And so if he didn't do something, it's simple, don't do it. May Allah grant us all a good understanding. And so I do not know of the Messenger of Allah marrying any of his women, nor giving any of his daughters in marriage for more than 12 coins. Allahu Akbar. And back in the day, obviously, it was different. But may Allah grant us all a good understanding. And so men, for those of us who want to be, as we know, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's divided the people into two categories. The first category is the one who is akram and taqiyun and barrun. He is dutiful and he is fearful of Allah and he is honorable in the sight of Allah. And on the other hand, you have a person, hayyin, humiliated in the sight of Allah, shaqiyun, wretched in the sight of Allah. Humiliated and wretched in the sight of Allah. He is not significant at all in the sight of Allah. And you and I, we get to choose which one of these do we want to be with, or do we want to be of. Do we want to be of those who have taqwa, those who are honorable in the sight of Allah? May Allah grant us all taqwa of Him. May Allah make us all of those who are kareem in His sight. And so when we give our daughters in marriage, you also have to bear in mind the circumstances of the male. And you have to look at the situation of today. If you look at the vast majority of the youth today, they are struggling when it comes to finance. Then how foolish would it be for you to give such a big mahar? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, a person is married of one of four reasons. The first being deen, the second being their wealth, the third being their beauty, and the fourth being their status, or from their nobility or their lineage. And then he said, choose deen. May your hands be rubbed with dust. The ulama said that this means two things. That if you do choose deen, then you will become the most fortunate of all people. And if you don't choose deen, then you will become the most humiliated of all people. May Allah grant us all a good understanding. So yes, do not become arrogant just because you have some wealth, or not because you have a daughter and the ghira is too much that it makes you unreasonable. May Allah grant us all a good understanding. And likewise, this lesson we can also take for bid'ah. That if something was honorable in the sight of Allah, and if something was a sign of taqwa, then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would have been the first to do it, and the Sahaba following him. But then when you look at the different types of bid'ah, they did not do, meaning it has no honor with Allah, and it is not a sign of taqwa. Again, inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The most honorable of you, the most honorable of you in the sight of Allah is the one with the most amount of taqwa. Again, may Allah grant us all a good understanding. In another hadith, it's mentioned that man kana yu'minu billah wal yawmil akhir. Whoever believes in Allah and in the final day, فَلْيُحْسِنْ إِلَى جَارِهِ وَمَنْ كَانَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَلْيُكْرِمْ ضَيْفَهُ وَمَنْ كَانَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أو ليسكت. Subhanallah. Whoever believes in the last day, whoever believes in Allah and the last day, let him treat his neighbor well. فَلْيُحْسِنْ إِلَى جَارِهِ. Let him treat his neighbor well. Whoever believes in Allah and the last day, then let him honor his guest. You have to honor your guest. Whoever believes in Allah and the last day, then let him say something good. Let him say something good. فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا. You say something good. Oh, you be quiet. لِيَسْكُتْ. Oh, you just remain silent. And this is a powerful, powerful hadith. Again, the word, karam is mentioned in here. And that is specifically when it comes to honoring your guests. And this is something that's part of our deen, that if a person comes to your house, you have to honor them. You have to entertain them. You have to give them your attention. Youth today, youngsters especially, when families come visiting, we'll greet them, then we'll go back to our rooms because we're too busy on our games, or we're too busy watching movies or TV or playing on our phones or anything else. But if you believe in Allah, if you truly believe in Allah, and if you truly believe on Yawm al-Akhir, now subhanAllah, we were reciting in Salah today in Surah Waqi, such a powerful surah. Allah, He says, فَلَوْلَا إِن كُنْتُمْ غَيْرَ مَدِينِينَ. If you really are not going to be recompensed. Madineen comes from the word deen, dini dayana. That you have an entire way of life that you're going to be recompensed for. Allah is Ad-Dayyan, one of His names, the one who will judge you and award you according to your deeds. Maliki Yawmiddin. He's the king of Yawmuddin, the day of judgment, the day of recompense. So if you truly are not going to be recompensed for each and every single deed, تَرْجِعُونَهَا إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Then when a person is dying, go and bring that soul back into the body. But if you cannot do that, Allah, He says, وَكُلُّ صَغِيرٍ وَكَبِيرٍ مُسْتَطَرٍ. Every single deed, from the smallest to the biggest, it is all recorded in our record. May Allah grant us all a good understanding. So if you truly believe in that day, if you truly believe in Allah, then let you entertain your guest. Be generous with your guest. Feed them. Do whatever you can for them when they come over. Usually we say, oh, why is this person visiting me? Why do they have to come to my house? This is not karam. This is not honor. This is not honor in the sight of Allah. And subhanAllah, it's mentioned that the Arabs during the time of Rasulullah ﷺ, and even before, during the time of Jahiliyyah, when a person would come to them, they would not even ask him why he's there for the first 3 days. Only after 3 days, then they would say, look, why have you actually come to visit us? Now subhanAllah, which is also mentioned in another hadith, that whoever believes in Allah and the last day, let him honor his guest and grant him reward for a day and a night. And it is not permissible for him to stay so long that he causes annoyance to his host. Now this is coming from the other side. Maybe you're going to visit somebody else. Maybe you're going back home to another country you haven't been in a while, and you want to stay there for 2-3 months, and then you know it's going to cause them inconvenience. You know that they still have a life to live, but still you're going and you're intruding on them rather than keeping it balanced. And Rasulullah ﷺ said that you are not allowed, it is not permissible for you to go and stay at a person's house for so long that you're going to cause him any annoyance. Hospitality is for 3 days, and whatever he spends on him after 3 days, it is all charity. So if a person comes and stays with you, then anything beyond 3 days, it is all sadaqah for you. Anything that you give, any food, anything that you spend on them, it is all sadaqah for you, and that is rewardable in the sight of Allah or with Allah. Again, may Allah grant us all a good understanding. It's narrated also that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Al-hasabul mal wal-karamu taqwa. That being honorable is wealth, and having noble character is taqwa. Having noble character, makarimul akhlaq, it is a sign of taqwa. May Allah grant us all a good understanding. So being honorable in wealth, what this means is being independent from the people. That you don't go and you ask the people for wealth. If you are in a need, even then you don't ask the people, you only ask Allah. As He says also in another hadith, Rasulullah ﷺ said, if you have to ask anyone, ask Allah alone. If you have any need, you ask Allah alone. Yes, the people will still come and help you perhaps, but then you realize that is the favor of Allah. He is the one sending them to you. He is the one sending them to you. But you don't go and ask the people. We don't go around begging people. We don't go around asking people to help us in our situations. We only ask Allah. So being independent, being self-sufficient, where we don't have to ask the people, that is honorable. That you go and you work so that you know that you don't have to rely on anybody else, that is honorable in the sight of Allah. Al-hasabul mal wal-karam wal-taqwa. And to have taqwa, that is honorable in the sight of Allah. That is what noble character is. May Allah grant us all a good understanding yet again. And it's also narrated, Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu, he said that Rasulullah sallallahu said, Makarimul akhlaq min a'malil jannah. Subhanallah. To be honorable in your morals and in your character is of the deeds of Jannah. So if you find yourself being an honorable person, dutiful to Allah, dutiful to your parents, having, barrun, being dutiful with all of the obligations Allah has given to you, taqiyun, having fear of Allah. There's also another word in the Sunnah called naqiyun, meaning to be pure at heart, that you don't allow any grudges into your heart. So taqiyun, naqiyun. And karam, to be honorable in your behavior. Then that is of the deeds of Jannah. Likewise the opposite, to behave in a humiliated manner, to not care about the morals that Allah and His Messenger has taught us in the Quran and the Sunnah, to not care about how we treat the people. That is of the deeds of Jahannam. May Allah protect us. May Allah grant us all good character. Likewise, it's also mentioned in another narration that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that the people should be led in salah by the one who is most well versed in the recitation of the Quran. Now this has multiple interpretations of them. They say the person who's memorized most of the Quran. Other people, they say the one who understands most of the Quran. So regarding the grammar of the Quran, regarding the rules when it comes to the recitation of the Quran, and also the understanding of the Quran. Now we are more inclined to the second opinion, because a person can memorize the entire Quran but he doesn't know even the meaning of Surah Fatiha. That is not good. That is not good. As we know from other ahadith, Rasulullah said the Quran is either a witness for you or against you. The Quran, one of its names is Muhaymin, a witness. It sees what you do. It's witnessing your actions. If your actions are in accordance with the Quran and the Sunnah, then it is a witness for you on Yawmul Qiyamah, and it will intercede for you. And like how Rasulullah says, Ni'ma shafi', the best intercessor for you is the Quran. But if your actions are not aligning with the Quran and the Sunnah, then it will be bearing witness against you. Imagine you're not offering your salah, and then you open the Quran, maybe in Ramadan, the time of Ramadan is coming near. Allahu Akbar. We should all be preparing now. May Allah grant us all afiyah and the ability to prepare for Ramadan in the best way. And so after an entire year, we're going to open the Quran. We start reciting from beginning to end. Right at the beginning, Alif Lam Mim, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ وَيُقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ. But the entire year, you're not establishing your salah. What do you think the Quran is doing for you on Yawm al-Qiyamah? Ya Allah, He lived by me? He implemented the commands in His life? Or otherwise? Allahu Akbar. May Allah grant us all a good understanding. May Allah protect us from His displeasure on that day. And so he continues to say that if they are equal in recitation, then the one who's more knowledgeable in the Sunnah should lead the Salah. If there are people who are equal in that also, then the person who did Hijrah first. Now this Hijrah is referring to the Hijrah during the time of Rasulullah ﷺ, going from Mecca to Medina. So whoever did that Hijrah first, then they are more worthy of leading the Salah. If they are both like that, then the person who is elder than the other. And then he says, and this is the key point in this, is that وَلَا يُجْلَسْ عَلَى تَكْرِيمَتِهِ فِي بَيْتِهِ, that none of you should sit in another man's place of honor in his house without permission, إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ or بِإِذْنِ, without his permission. So when you go to a person's house, let's say they have a specific chair that you know that the man of the house always sits on, then nobody else should sit in that place except with the permission of that man. Likewise, when it comes to the masajid, nobody else is allowed to sit in the mihrab because that is the imam's place of honor. Doesn't matter who else it may be. And so this is how, again, we respect one another. When you visit other people's house, let's say you're sitting in this day and age, we have our dining tables, and usually the head of the family will sit in a specific place. And nobody else should go and sit there, especially if you're a guest. Why? Because the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he forbade you to do so. But it is part of respecting people. Again, may Allah grant us all a good understanding. Now Rasulullah SAW, he says, and subhanAllah, I just thought I'd mention also this hadith because I came across it and it concerns all of us, that Allah will prepare for that person who goes to the masjid every morning and every afternoon. So if you go to the masjid every morning and evening or afternoon, then Allah, He will continue increasing the beauty of your Jannah. Every single time you come to His house, He's increasing your reward in Jannah. And so it's mentioned that in the afternoon, so an honorable place in paradise with good hospitality is what is being prepared for these people who go to the masajid every morning and every afternoon. And so let this be motivation for all of us to continue persisting, to make it a consistent habit that we come to the masjid every morning and every afternoon with the best reward in mind, having hope in Allah that He is preparing Jannah for us. May Allah grant us all Jannatul Firdaus. And so we move on to our next topic, which is how to live by the name and how to do tasbeeh with this name. And so it's mentioned, and this is from a da'if hadith, but we are allowed to use weak narrations in order to understand the virtue and the lessons behind things. And so it's mentioned that a person, he was making a dua, and part of it he was praising Allah, and he said, Subhanalladhi ta'attafa al-izza wa qala bihi Subhanalladhi labisa al-majd wa takarrama bihi Subhanalladhi la yanbaghi at-tasbihu illa lah Subhana dhil fadl wal ni'am Subhana dhil majdi wal karam Subhana dhil jalali wal ikram. Specifically that last part. He said, Subhana dhil jalali wal ikram. And we know we all say Subhanallah, Subhanallah, Subhanallah. But perhaps when you're making your dua and you want other ways to praise Allah and to glorify Allah, and you say Subhana dhil jalali wal ikram, then that would be acceptable to put it as a practice as long as you know the meaning of it. And as long as you know also that even when it comes to da'if hadith, like we mentioned, you can learn the fada'il of things. It cannot be used as hakam, as rulings, but you can use it for fada'il, for virtues, for understanding certain things. May Allah grant us all a good understanding. Likewise, when the Sahaba, they were looking for a way of making the people aware of how to come for salah. And at first they had certain ideas, let's use a bell like the Christians. And then a few people, they had the dream of the adhan. And that's how the adhan, it came into being. And so one of the people, when he heard this, he said, Ahmadullah Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam hamdan ala al-adhani kathira. And so it means, it's the person is Abdullah bin Zayd al-Ansari. He said concerning that I praise Allah, Ahmadullah, I praise Allah, Dhul Jalal, the possessor of majesty, wa Dhul Ikram, and the possessor of honor, hamdan ala al-adhani kathira. Many praises for the adhan. And again, we learn from this. Perhaps you want to praise Allah when you're beginning your dua. As we know, this is the adab of dua, that we begin by praising Allah, we glorify Allah, and we send blessings upon Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. This could be one of the ways. Ahmadullah Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam, Subhana Dhil Jalali Wal Ikram. Allahumma lakal hamd wa lakal shukr. And then you send salawat, Allahumma salli wa sallim ala nabiyyina Muhammad. And then you start making your dua. That is how you get your dua answered. And so this is again another way that we can praise Allah and glorify Allah. And we're also going to mention a hadith. Again, this hadith, it is da'if in nature. So there is a slight weakness to the narration. However, in terms of learning tawassul, it is perhaps one of the best hadith we come across. Because everything that's got to do with tawassul and how to approach dua in order to get a response from Allah, then it's all covered in this. And so it's mentioned. So Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, he mentioned that we were with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and Ali ibn Abu Talib radiallahu anh, he came to him and he said, may my father and my mother be ransomed for you, Ya Rasulullah. This Quran has suddenly left my heart. This Quran has suddenly left my heart, and I do not find myself capable of it. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, Ya Abul Hasan, should I not tell you of a way? Should I not teach you of such a way, or teach you certain words that Allah will benefit you with, and benefit whomever you teach, and they will make whatever you have learnt in your chest firm? And so he said, of course, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, so teach me. And so he said, when it is the night before Friday, and then if you are able to stand in the last third of the night, then verily it is a witnessed hour. Now this is perhaps where some of the weakness may come in, that we know it is not only the night of Jum'ah, but every single night in the last portion, this is a time when dua is not rejected. This is the time of tahajjud. And this is the first point of tawassul that we learn. That if you want to make dua and you want a response from Allah, then you need to be making an effort to be waking up at that last third of the night. The ulama said, if you really want your dua to be accepted, but you're busy sleeping away, then the simple answer is you didn't want a response. If you really want a response, you will force yourself to wake up at that time, even if it's just to make dua for 5 minutes before you go back to sleep. Because this is a time when dua is not rejected. Rasulullah ﷺ said, the wording is, Allah, He descends to the first heaven in a manner that befits His Majesty, calling out, who is there that's asking me anything? I'm ready to give it now. Who wants anything? Who's there making dua? Ask me, I'll give. This is an open invitation from Allah. So if you really want a response, then you'll be waking up, Ya Rab, I want the response. Grant me this, grant me that. Allahu Akbar. May Allah grant us all a good understanding. To continue. And so he said that when you offer your salah, you will also recite the Quran and pray 4 rak'ah and recite Fatiha in the rak'at, and also recite Surah Yasin, and also recite Hamim Dukhan, and recite Surah Sajda, and recite Surah Mulk. Again, we do not need to recite certain surahs for certain fada'il. As we know, that's not part of the Sunnah itself. As we know, reciting Surah Mulk before we go to sleep, that is part of the Sunnah. And Rasulullah ﷺ said, you'll be protected from adhab al-qabr. You'll be protected from the punishments of the qabr on after you pass away. And you'll also be protected from the punishments of Allah on Yawm al-Akhir, or Yawm al-Din. So we know that from this, yes, we have to be reciting Surah Mulk every night. But then other surahs, usually there is not certain fada'il. You know, we actually come across messages, people, they send me, oh, if you're feeling ill, recite Surah Taghabun 5,000 times. I'm thinking, what? I can just make dua at the time of tahajjud, Ya Rabb, grant me shifa, and it's done. Why do I have to recite a certain surah 5,000 times in order to achieve something? This is not part of the Sunnah. Did Rasulullah ﷺ do this? No. Did the Sahaba do this? No. If you want a response from Allah, recite Ayah Karima, which is La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu min al-zalimin. 10,000 times, Allah will respond to you. Really? I can say it just once. The Sunnah tells me I make this dua and I have Islam, I'm a Muslim. No Muslim makes this dua just once. La ilaha illa anta subhanak inni kuntu min al-zalimin. And then he makes dua, except that Allah will forgive him. He will remove all of his difficulties and he will respond to his duas. So I don't need to recite it 10,000 times or 20,000 times or 50 million times in order to attain a response from Allah, but I can recite it once. That's the Sunnah. So again, we have to have a good understanding of this. May Allah grant us all a good understanding. And also Rasulullah ﷺ, he says that recite whatever is easy for you from the Quran. So whatever is easy for you, recite that. We also know that reciting the Quran and then making dua, it is more likely that Allah will hasten to respond to you. Making dua after any good deed is what we're supposed to do. That is part of tawassul, and that's the key point in here, is that we do a righteous deed and then we make dua. You want a response from Allah, do a righteous deed and then make dua. And the best of your deeds is none other than the recitation of the Quran. It is the greatest form, or one of the greatest forms of dhikrullah. Likewise also with salah. So may Allah grant us all a good understanding. And then he continued to say, so once you have done this, when you have finished what you have done, then praise Allah and mention the greatness and the praise of Allah in an excellent manner. And then send salawat upon me, and send this upon an excellent manner. So we know again from adab, we begin by praising Allah, and then we send blessings and salutations upon Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he said, seek forgiveness from Allah. As we know, this is also part of the tawassul. That after you praise Allah and you send salawat upon Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you need to seek forgiveness for your sins first. Because sometimes we do certain things, it becomes a barrier between us and the response from Allah. It's mentioned specifically a person who is disrespectful towards his parents. Maybe you're trying your best. So you begin by asking Allah to forgive you for that disrespect. After that, Allah, He'll respond to you. Or perhaps you've been consuming haram. As we know from the narration, the person, he was wearing haram, consuming haram, everything, his earnings was haram. So Rasulullah said, how can Allah respond to him? Why would Allah respond to him? But maybe if you seek forgiveness for that, and you make a commitment with Allah that you will leave all of that, then He will still respond to you thereafter. That's something sometimes we don't, or we tend to forget. Oh, I think I'm being disrespectful to my parents, so now Allah won't accept my du'as, so I'm just going to leave du'a. This is what we do. And we find ourselves going very far away from Allah. But if you just seek istighfar for whatever shortcomings you may have, then that would actually remove it. Because Rasulullah said, all of you are sinners. If you ask me to forgive you, I'll forgive you. Done. Likewise with guidance, all of you are misguided except for the one who I guide. So ask me for guidance and I'll guide you. So all you have to do is ask Allah and He'll give it. So you begin by seeking istighfar. And He said, seek istighfar for all of the believing men and women. So رَبِّ اغْفِرْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ. This is even an added thing. It's even better if you do this. And also seek istighfar for the people who came before you, who have preceded you in faith. رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَا بِالْإِيمَانِ. So once you've sought istighfar, and then you start making dua. And we can make dua, we know of the hadith of the greatest names of Allah. We begin with that. Allahumma inni as'aluka bi'anna laka alhamd, la ilaha illa anta, wahdaka la sharika lak. And you use the names that you know. Al-Mannan, Badi'a as-samawati wal-ard, Ya Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam, Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum. So you've praised Allah, and you sent blessings upon Rasulullah ﷺ, and you sought istighfar. And then you called out to Allah using what you know as His greatest names, or any of them could be His greatest name. Knowing that Rasulullah ﷺ said, when you call out to Allah like this, He responds and He gives you what you're asking for. That's the only thing. No if, no or, no but, no exception. You ask Allah with His greatest name, He will respond to you and He will give you what you are asking for. And then the hadith, it continues. So Rasulullah ﷺ told him to say, and we're still mentioning this because we see how we use the attributes of Allah and the names of Allah whilst we are asking Him. So he said, Allahumma arhamni. So say after you have praised Allah and sent blessings and salutation and sought istighfar, Allahumma arhamni bitarkil ma'asi abadan ma abaqaytani. Warhamni an atakallafa ma la ya'anini. Warzuqni husna an-nadhari fima yurdika anni. Allahu Akbar. So Allahumma arhamni. Oh Allah, have mercy on me. We know that Allah is Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. So you can say, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, irhamni bitarkil ma'asi. So have mercy on me by me leaving or abandoning disobedience to you. Abadan ma abaqaytani. For as long as you keep me remaining. So you're asking Allah that by His rahmah, you don't want to ever disobey Him for as long as you are alive. And again, we use this for all other things. You want to memorize the Quran and understand the Quran, then you're using it like this. Oh Allah, grant me an understanding of the Quran. Abadan ma abaqaytani. For as long as I'm alive in this dunya. Oh Allah, I want the ability to be grateful to you. So allow me to be grateful to you. Abadan ma abaqaytani. For as long as I remain in this dunya. Subhanallah. Like that, we implementing these points into our dua. Likewise, at the end of it, he says, Fima yurdika anni. So, وَرْزُقْنِي حُسْنَ النَّظَرِ فِيمَا يُرْضِيكَ عَنِّي. And the main point here is فِيمَا يُرْضِيكَ عَنِّي. In a way that you are pleased with me. Oh Allah, bless my sight. وَرْزُقْنِي, provide for me حُسْنَ النَّظَرِ, the best sight, or blessed sight, which that you are pleased with. Like this, we're asking for all other things. Oh Allah, grant me such good character, فِيمَا يُرْضِيكَ عَنِّي, that you are pleased with. Oh Allah, grant me the ability to live and implement the Quran in my life in a way that you are pleased with. And this is how we're supposed to be making our dua. Always thinking, why are you doing certain things? Because you want Allah to be pleased with you. Why are you seeking istighfar for your sins? Because you want Allah's pleasure. Why do you want Allah to have mercy upon you? Because you want His pleasure. Because you know that it's only through the pleasure of Allah that you will attain success in this life and the next. So, فِيمَا يُرْضِيكَ عَنِّي. One major point of tawassul. You are always seeking the pleasure of Allah. Likewise with all other things. Oh Allah, get me married to such a person where I will behave with them in such a way that you will be pleased with. Oh Allah, grant me this rizq. Increase me in this rizq, so I may give in sadaqah in a manner that will make you pleased with me. Oh Allah, enable me to establish my salah and to have khushu' and ihsan in such a way, فِيمَا يُرْضِيكَ عَنِّي, that you will be pleased with me. That's always the bottom line in all of our du'as. Whatever it is you ask for. May Allah grant us all a good understanding. May Allah grant us all His pleasure. And then he continued. And he said, say, Allahumma badi'a as-samawati wal-ard, ya Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam, wal-izzati allati la turam. Again, we can say this in our du'as. So, Allahumma badi'a as-samawati wal-ard. We've been over this name. Oh Allah, originator of the heavens and the earth. Ya Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam, owner of majesty and honor. Wal-izzati allati la turam. And the izzah, honor also, or might that is never ever exceeded or overcome. As'aluka ya Allah ya Rahman, bijalalik wa nuri wajhik. Subhanallah, how powerful is this dua already. I ask you, ya Allah, ya Rahman, bijalalik, by your majesty, wa nuri wajhik, and the light of your face. And tulzima qalbi hifdha kitabik kama allamtani, that you commit my heart to constantly remembering what is in the Quran, so that you always live by the Quran. Again, such a powerful dua. And this is how we ask Allah, whatever it is that you want. Oh Allah, I ask you, if you don't know this in Arabic, you can say it in English. Oh Allah, I ask you by your majesty, I ask you by your mercy, I ask you by the light of your face, Ya Allah, that you grant me this and you grant me that, in a way that you will be pleased with me. Remember, always add that to your du'as. And so again, we move on to the next hadith. We'll keep that over there because it has been quite a while. And so this is just for us to understand how to use the attributes of Allah in making dua. The main point is that we praise Allah and we send blessings and salutations upon Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you do not do this, then you have been hasty in your dua. A person, he was making dua and he didn't begin by praising Allah. And he didn't begin by sending salawat upon Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said he has been hasty with his dua. Rather first praise Allah and then send salawat and then ask Allah, and Allah, He will respond to you. If you don't do that, then you have been hasty. Sometimes we raise our hands, Ya Allah grant me this, Ya Allah grant me that. But you didn't praise Him, you didn't send salawat. So how will Allah respond to that dua? Because you have now been hasty. May Allah grant us solely good understanding. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Alidhu biya Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam. That be constant, hold on tightly and beg Allah, biya Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam, with the name of Allah, Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam. Always be constant in saying in all of your du'as, Ya Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam, Ya Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam. This is a means of Allah responding to you. Whatever dua you make, you say, Ya Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam, grant me this, grant me that. Likewise also, say 3 times. It was the habit of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that when he would ask Allah for something, he would say 3 times. You want Allah to forgive you, ask Him 3 times. Rabbi ighfirli, Rabbi ighfirli, Rabbi ighfirli. The 3 times, because it adds emphasis and is more befitting that a slave, he repeats his du'as begging the Rabb. That is how the Rabb will answer his slave. Likewise, it's mentioned, Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anh, he said that whenever a matter would distress Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would say, Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum, Birahmatika Astaghith, and Ya Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam. Like we mentioned, this is also from the previous hadith we mentioned, is Alidhu biya Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam. Maybe a calamity just touched you, and your mind is all over the place, you don't know how to make dua right now. Then just say, Ya Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam, Ya Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam. Your heart knows, and Allah, He knows what the suffering that you're going through. So just hold on to Ya Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam. And so it's also mentioned in another narration that a man, he was making a dua. And he said, Allahumma inni as'aluka tamam al-ni'mah. Oh Allah, I ask you for the completion and the perfection of your ni'mah. So then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he asked like, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by tamam al-ni'mah? And then he said, protection from Jahannam and admittance into Jannah. And then he said, that's correct. But then we might wonder, what could we mean by tamam al-ni'mah? That when we make dua, we have to understand what they mean. There was a person, he was making dua, and he said, oh Allah, I ask you for the white palace on the right side of Jannah. He said, "Oh Allah, I ask you for the white palace on the right side of Jannah." And then his father said to him, "How do you know there's a white palace on the right side of Jannah?" This is not how we make dua, going into too much specifics. Rather, be comprehensive. Ask Allah for entry into Jannah, and you get everything that's in Jannah anyways. There was a person, he was making dua, "Oh Allah, I seek refuge in you from Jahannam, and from this place in Jahannam, and this punishment in Jahannam. I seek refuge in you from Hamim and Ghassaq. I seek refuge in you from Yahmum and Zaqqum and Ghislin." And then his father said, "What are you doing? Just ask Allah to, Allahumma ajirni minan nar. Oh Allah, protect me from the fire. You'll be protected from everything of Jahannam anyways." It's simple. Be comprehensive and direct in your du'as. Likewise, he also mentions, when you make your dua, don't say, "Ya Allah, grant me this if you want. Ya Allah, give me that if you want." Because none of you can force Allah. And you're supposed to make dua in such a way that you have 100% conviction that Allah will give you. So like if you think, "If you want, Ya Allah, do this," or if you want, then that's not 100% of full conviction. That's not full yaqeen when you make your du'as. So that rather just make your dua, "Ya Allah, grant me this." Done. Now Allah will decide if it's good for you or not good for you. You leave it with Allah. You don't have to say, "Ya Allah, if this would be good for me, then grant it to me." Because Allah will only do that which is beneficial for you. He's Ar-Rahman. He's Ar-Rahman, so you don't really have to say that. But there is a way that you can say, let's say perhaps you want to have a divorce and get married to somebody else, and you don't want something that Allah has given to you anymore. So you can say, "Ya Allah, if you know that this will be the best thing for me always, then make me pleased with it." You can say that. So then rather than you wanting a divorce and going elsewhere, or rather you wanting another job, or rather you wanting something else, you'll become happy with what Allah has given you. So you can say that, but it all depends on how you say it. Sometimes a person will come and say, "Allahumma aslihni." "Oh Allah, fix me." What do you mean by fix me? Allah is Al-Jabbar. When He fixes, it's forceful and you won't like it. How could you say such a thing? "Oh Allah, fix me, fix him, fix that." Don't say that. Rather, if you look at the Sunnah, how do you say, if you want yourself to be rectified, "Allahumma aslih li sha'ni kulla." That's from the dua, "Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum bi rahmatika astaghith, aslih li sha'ni kulla." Rectify my affairs. So you don't say, "Aslihni," fix me. Maybe something is seriously wrong with you and you don't know, and you have to go through war and disease and cancer before that is removed from you. And now that's what you're asking Allah. So you have to have a good understanding and know how to ask Allah. The simplest way is you follow the Quranic and the Sunnah du'as. The du'as that are in the Quran and the Sunnah, that is the most comprehensive and the best of all du'a. And so then Rasulullah ﷺ, he passed by another man and he said, "Allahumma inni as'aluka sabr." It sounds good, right? "Oh Allah, I ask you for patience." He's in a difficulty. So, "Ya Allah, I ask you for patience." And what did Rasulullah ﷺ say? That indeed, you have asked Allah for bala. You have asked Allah for difficulty. A good example to bring it closer to understanding. Imagine you are weak. You are weak. And then you go to a boxing coach and he says, "Coach, make me strong." What do you think he's going to do? He's going to start punching you up until you can take it. Right? So if you ask Allah, "Allahumma inni as'aluka sabr," "Oh Allah, I ask you for sabr," what do you think Allah is going to do? He's going to send you more difficulties so that you can bear sabr. So then Rasulullah ﷺ said, "Why don't you ask Allah for al-afiyah instead?" Ask Allah for al-afiyah, well-being, and the removal of your issues, the removal of your tests. And then he went to another person. And this person, he said, "Ya Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam." Then Rasulullah ﷺ said, "Ask, make your request. Ask Allah whatever you want because you have made dua with this name." And Allah, He is now listening to you. He's ready to respond to you. Again, teaching us that perhaps, you make dua beginning with this name or calling upon Allah with Ya Dhul Jalali Wal Ikraam, then this is a means of you being responded to. May Allah grant us all a good understanding. And we'll keep it over there for today. Next week, we've got one more topic, which is, how to implement this name in our salah. And the entire study of Asmaa Wa Sifaat, it all comes down to this: how to offer salah and how to make dua. Today we went over how to make dua, so next week we'll go over how to offer salah. And the week after that, we will have our next breakfast, inshaAllah. May Allah make it beneficial for all of us. Allahumma anfa'na bima 'allamtana wa 'allimna ma yanfa'una warzuqna 'ilman tanfa'una bih. Allahumma ij'al khayra a'malina akhirah wa khayra a'malina khawatimah waj'al khayra ayyamana yawma nalqak. Allahumma zidna wa la tunqusna وأكرمنا ولا تهنا وأعطنا ولا تحرمنا وآرثنا ولا تؤثر علينا وارضنا وارض عنا. اللهم إنا نسألك الثبات في الأمر والعزيمة على الرشد ونسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك ونسألك شكر نعمتك وحسن عبادتك ونسألك قلبا سليما ولسانا صادقا ونسألك من خير ما تعلم ونعوذ بك من شر ما تعلم ونستغفرك لما تعلم إنك أنت علام الغيوب. اللهم ارزقنا حبك وحب من ينفعنا حبه عندك. اللهم ما رزقتنا مما نحب فاجعله قوة لنا فيما تحب. اللهم وما زويت عنا مما نحب فاجعله فراغا لنا فيما تحب. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد. أقول قولي هذا سبحانك اللهم بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.